All right, this is the music production iceberg. The deeper we get, the more obscure and complex the terms will become. There are a total of
41
terms in the video, so see if you can keep track and see if you know more than me. I know all of them, so good luck with that. All right. MIDI. When you plug your keyboard into your computer and you play some notes on your keyboard and some notes come out of your computer, they are communicating via MIDI, or musical instrument digital interface. Panning, the distribution between the left and right channels or speakers. Mixing, manipulating the volume, dynamics, and spectrum of the individual elements that make up the music so that they fit together more nicely. Mastering. Mastering is when you treat all of the elements together in the piece of music as one thing. You can change the volume, spectrum, and dynamics of that one sound, which is the whole song. Bounce. Take the, what do you do? It takes the contents of your DAW or the program that you make your music on, and it turns it into a file for you to listen to. Reverb. How sound reflects off of surfaces. Every surface will reflect some of the sound and it will absorb some of the sound. Reverb effects simulate a sound moving through a physical space like a room. DAW, digital audio workstation, programs that we use to produce music. A sampler is a device that can store, replay, and manipulate audio files. An MPC 1000 is an example of a classic and world-changing sampler. Arpeggiator. An arpeggiator is a device that when we play notes simultaneously into it, it plays them sequentially for us. Level 2. Dynamics. Dynamics are the relationship or the distance between the loud and quiet parts of the sound. A recording of orchestral classical music is usually super dynamic. So it gets really quiet and really loud. Compression. You can make the quiet parts of a sound closer in volume to the louder parts of the sound by running it through a compressor. Envelope. How the intensity of the sound changes over time. ADSR. Attack, decay, sustain, release. That's a tool within synthesizers that is meant to simulate the envelope of a sound. EQ is a tool that increases or decreases a range or multiple ranges of frequencies. One example of EQing is turning down the treble in your car stereo so that the sound isn't as harsh. Gate. That's a tool that only allows sounds of a certain intensity to pass through. So right now I'm speaking through a gate. Only the loudest sounds are coming through. Chorus. An effect that comes from playing a delayed copy of a sound with itself. Usually the length of the delay is modulated over time with an LFO to give you that wow effect. Decibel, the measure of intensity of a sound wave. Distortion, when a signal passes the limit of a circuit or a digital signal path, the tops of it get sheared off and it changes the sound. When done in a controlled and intentional way, it sounds great, because it adds all these beautiful, new complex partials to the sound. Filter is a tool that can change the amplitude of some frequencies while not affecting others. This sound is currently going through a filter. And this sound is also currently going through a filter. And this sound is also currently going through a filter. Level 3, a bus. That is a track where you can send the sound from multiple other tracks to process them as a group. Sample rate. When you have a sound file on your computer, whether it's a song or a recording of a horse going nee, that is basically like a digital representation of that sound wave. The way that it gets represented is by taking a lot of measurements of how loud the wave is at any given moment. Sample rate is how many measurements are taken within a given second. Bit depth is the amount of numbers that your computer can use to represent one of these little measurements. Unison, supersaw. That is stacking a bunch of waveforms together and slightly detuning them so that you get this dope ass rave style hype effect. Frequency modulation. That is when you modulate the frequency of one wave with another wave. If the wave that you use to modulate the first wave is going at audio rate, it will change the timbre of the sound that you hear. White noise. A random signal with equal power across all frequencies. Pink noise. Pink noise is also a random signal, but it's filtered. Modular synthesizer. These are made up of multiple independent sound generating or processing components where the user creates the signal path. On this modular synth, nothing happens if I press a button if I haven't made any of the connections. On this Dave Smith Instruments Prophet, no matter what I do, an oscillator is going to go through the filter and it's going to go out the amplifier. So it's not modular. Sibilance / de-essing. Certain consonants like s or sh or z or zh can be a little annoying, especially if they're too loud. De-essing is anything that you do to reduce the harshness of these consonants. A de-esser is a dedicated tool that is just meant to do this one task. Fourth level. Okay. Granular synthesis, often misdefined. Any type of sound processing or generating method that uses tiny little chunks of sound as its basis. I made an entire video about granular synthesis that you can probably watch here or there or somewhere, but I cover the whole thing. Parallel or New York style compression. This is when you mix a heavily compressed signal with a uncompressed or not so compressed signal. Lossless / lossy compression. Remember when I was telling you about the impressive amount of ones and zeros it takes for your computer to represent a sound wave? Well, sometimes that can cause problems, especially if you want to cram in like 2,000 songs into your iPod Nano in 2007 or something. Yeah. Lossless compression allows you to remove some of those ones and zeros without affecting the quality of the audio whatsoever. Lossy compression, like MP3s, uses a perceptual model for basically what the computer thinks are not very important ones and zeros for humans, and it gets rid of them. Ratio. That is when someone comments on your Twitter post and they get more likes than you. Formant. That is resonant frequencies that happens when humans make vowel sounds, like or o or e. When you add those resonances to a non-speech sound, they can take on a speech-like quality, which is pretty cool. Vocoder. The term comes from voice encoder. Basically, it takes a sound wave, breaks it down into a bunch of bands, and then measures how the sound wave changes in intensity for each of the bands. Then it takes another sound wave, breaks it into the same bands, and applies the changes of intensity for each band to the corresponding band in the second sound. So basically, it encodes the first sound into the second one. Transient. The very, very beginning of the sound when it jumps up from 0 to something loud. If a sound starts really gradually like this, it doesn't have a transient. If you hit a snare drum really hard and there's that like burst of noise right at the very, very beginning, that burst of noise is the transient. Okay, we are at the final level, people. Quantization is chunking. Digital audio is quantized because it breaks down a continuous analog or acoustic waveform into a bunch of little chunks. It just happens that the chunks play back so quickly that we don't notice that they're chunks, but they are indeed chunks. If you take some drum hits and move them onto the grid so they all fit to the grid, that would be another example of quantization. Fourier transform takes a complex wave, like the one of me speaking to you right now, and it breaks it up into all the little sine waves or partials that make it up. All pass filters allow all the frequencies to pass through, which is kind of weird, right? Because that seems counterintuitive. But they make phase changes. So basically, they delay some of the frequencies to get certain types of effects. So actually, a phaser is an example of an all-pass filter, and so is a comb filter. Auditory scene analysis. So I'm talking. You can hear the words that I'm saying, even though there's this other music playing and this other weird sound. And it might be quite annoying, but you can still understand that I am speaking to you, and then there's a song playing, and that there's this other annoying sound playing. That's kind of weird because there are all these different sounds, and you know that they're all different, but you only have 2 ears. Basically, our brains are insane, and they have this ability to break down the complex wave that reaches our ears and understand that there are different sounds happening, and you just experience it that way. Auditory scene analysis is a model that this guy, Albert Bregman, came up with that shows the different types of cues that our brains use to differentiate those sounds. HRTF. For better or for worse, our ears have a shape, and they are made out of meat. And they're also attached to our heads, which also have a shape and are also made out of meat. And they're attached to our bodies, which also have a shape and are made out of meat. HRTF, or head-related transfer function, basically describes what happens when sound waves hit all that meat. Our brains take cues from how the sound waves are bouncing off of all that meat to understand whether a sound is coming from above or below, or in front or behind, or from really close or really far, or from left or right of us. Rhythm equals pitch. Basically, there is a speed where once something starts happening at that speed or faster, our brains decide that it's a pitch, and when it happens slower than it, it decides it's a rhythm. Here's an example.